There is one golden rule about tarot cards that every reader in the world knows. One rule that must never be broken under any circumstances whatsoever. Never, under any condition, use someone else's deck. Because some cards carry more than just fortune. Some cards carry death. It was supposed to be a perfect weekend. A group of 7 college friends rented a beautiful old mansion in the Catskill Mountains to celebrate their friend Elise's birthday. Good food, good drinks, good company. Nobody expected it to become the last weekend of their lives. The friends were a lively and close group. Haley was the smart and sensitive one, secretly gifted in astrology and tarot reading. Grant was a recent ex-boyfriend, making the weekend already slightly awkward. And 5 others, Elise, Lucas, Madeline, Paige, and Paxton, came along for the fun. The mansion was enormous and beautiful on the outside, but inside it carried a strange and heavy atmosphere, like the walls themselves were holding something back. The friends ignored the feeling. They lit a fire outside, opened their drinks, and laughed into the night like nothing could touch them. As the night went on, the group ran out of alcohol. Someone suggested searching the mansion for more. They explored room after room until they found something far more interesting than drinks. In the basement, behind a locked door with a warning sign, they found a wooden box. Inside the wooden box was a deck of tarot cards, unlike anything any of them had ever seen. The cards were hand-painted, ancient-looking, with detailed and deeply unsettling illustrations of figures from the major arcana. Strange symbols decorated the box. The room felt 10 degrees colder suddenly. Any sensible person would have put the box back and walked away. But these were young people on a birthday weekend, with drinks in their hands and curiosity in their hearts. They carried the box upstairs to the fireplace, and they asked Haley, the one who knew tarot, to do their readings. Haley was hesitant. Something about these cards felt deeply wrong to her. The illustrations were too dark. The energy felt too heavy. But her friends laughed and encouraged her and called her superstitious. So she sat down in front of the fire, picked up the ancient deck, and began to read. One by one, Haley read each friend's cards in the warm glow of the fireplace. The readings were detailed and eerie and strangely specific. Each person drew a final card that represented a figure from the deck. Elise drew the High Priestess. Lucas drew the Hermit. Madeline drew the Hanged Man. Paige drew the Magician. Paxton drew the Fool. Grant drew the Devil, which made everyone laugh nervously. And finally, Haley read her own cards. The last card she turned over made the room go completely silent. It was the Death card. Haley stared at it for a long, uncomfortable moment, then forced a smile. The group laughed it off and went to bed. The next morning they packed their bags and drove back to campus, feeling perfectly fine. The birthday weekend was over. The cards were forgotten. Or so they thought, because something had already been set in motion that night. Something ancient, something hungry, something that never forgot. That very night, Elise heard strange sounds coming from the attic of a dormitory. She went to investigate alone, which no person in any horror movie should ever do, and found the attic door swinging open above her. She climbed up. The darkness was total. Then something moved. A monstrous figure emerged from the shadows of the attic. It looked exactly like the High Priestess from the tarot card, tall, twisted, draped in dark robes, but horrifying in a way the painted card could never fully capture. It moved toward Elise without a sound. She had no time to scream. The High Priestess creature attacked Elise with terrifying force, slamming the heavy attic ladder down on her repeatedly with supernatural strength. Elise was killed instantly. The next morning her death was reported as a tragic accident. Nobody connected it to the tarot reading. Nobody yet understood what had been unleashed that night. Then Lucas was next. Walking through a train station late at night, he became aware of a presence following him. A tall, hunched figure in a dark cloak, the Hermit from the cards, appeared from the shadows and chased him deeper into the restricted area of the station. Lucas ran as fast as he could through the empty station. The Hermit pursued him without hurry, as if it already knew exactly how this would end. Lucas stumbled onto the tracks just as the train came roaring through at full speed. He had no time to move. The Hermit watched without expression. 2 friends, dead in 2 days. Both deaths connected to the exact tarot cards they had drawn that night. The surviving friends gathered together, and the terrifying pattern became impossible to ignore. Elise had drawn the High Priestess. She was killed by the High Priestess. Lucas had drawn the Hermit. Haley was the first to say out loud what everyone was already thinking. The tarot cards were killing them. Each creature from the deck was hunting down the person who drew its card. And it would not stop until every single reading had been fulfilled. Until every single fate had been delivered. The group was terrified but they did not know what to do. The police would never believe them. How could anyone explain that supernatural creatures made of ancient dark magic were hunting college students based on birthday party tarot readings? They needed someone who would believe them. Someone who understood the cards. Haley searched online desperately for anyone with knowledge of cursed tarot decks and their history. She found a name, Alma Iesi, an elderly woman who had spent her entire life researching and documenting the supernatural history of tarot cards and the dark energy that certain ancient decks could carry. The surviving friends drove to Alma's house immediately. The old woman opened the door before they even knocked, as if she had been expecting them. She let them in without a word and sat them down in a room filled with books and artifacts and maps, covered in notes going back decades. Alma listened carefully as the friends described everything that had happened. Then she took a long, slow breath and began to tell them the history of the deck they had used that night. A history that stretched back over 200 years, to the year 1798, to a Hungarian count and his astrologer. In 1798, a powerful Hungarian count employed a gifted astrologer who could read the future with stunning and terrifying accuracy. The count trusted her completely. He asked her to read the cards for his pregnant wife before the birth of their child. The astrologer laid out the cards and went pale with what she saw. The cards showed that the count's wife and unborn child would both die during childbirth. The astrologer delivered this news with great sorrow. The count refused to believe it. He dismissed her reading as nonsense and lies. But weeks later, exactly as the cards had predicted, both his wife and child died during labor. The count was destroyed by grief, but instead of blaming fate, he blamed the astrologer. In his twisted and broken mind, he believed that she had somehow caused their deaths by predicting them. In a monstrous act of revenge, he ordered his soldiers to find the astrologer's young daughter and kill her. When the astrologer discovered what the count had done to her daughter, the grief and rage that consumed her was beyond anything human. She performed a dark and forbidden ritual, binding her own tortured soul to the deck of tarot cards she had used her entire life as a reader. In her final act of vengeance, the astrologer cursed the deck completely. She declared that anyone who used these cards, anyone who touched them and read from them, would be hunted down by the creatures of the major arcana and killed exactly as their reading had foretold. Then, she took her own life. The curse had been active for over 200 years. Alma showed the friends documented records of multiple groups of people across different countries in different decades, all killed in the same pattern, all connected to the same cursed deck of hand-painted cards. The friends stared at the records in horrified silence. Alma told them the only way to end the curse was to destroy the deck completely. The cards were still back at the mansion in the Catskills. The friends had to go back immediately and burn them before the remaining creatures claimed their remaining victims. They had no time to lose whatsoever. The friends got into their car and drove back toward the Catskill mansion at full speed. But on a dark and empty stretch of road, the car broke down suddenly, and before anyone could react, a twisted rope-like figure appeared from the darkness. The hanged man had found Madeline. The hanged man moved with unnatural speed and power. It seized Madeline before anyone could help her. The others watched in horror as their friend was taken. Madeline, who had drawn the hanged man card that night at the fireplace, was dead. Another reading fulfilled. Another fate delivered without mercy. Paxton, terrified beyond his limits, made the decision to turn back. He could not continue. He left the group and headed back toward campus, alone. The remaining friends, Haley, Grant, and Paige, pressed on toward the mansion on foot. The night was dark. The road was silent. Something was watching all of them. Back on campus, Paxton was not safe either. The fool, the creature corresponding to his card, began stalking him through the empty university buildings. Paxton ran through hallways and stairwells, desperately searching for safety. He managed to escape into an elevator with the help of his roommate. He survived, barely, by pure luck. Haley, Grant, and Paige reached the mansion and found Alma already there waiting for them. Alma told them she had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. She was going to perform a ritual to summon the spirit of the astrologer herself, directly from inside the cursed cards, and confront her face to face. Alma performed the ritual in the center of the mansion. The air changed completely. The temperature dropped. Every candle in the room flared simultaneously. And then from within the ancient cards themselves, the spirit of the astrologer materialized. 2 centuries of rage and grief and darkness condensed into one single terrifying presence. But the astrologer was not interested in conversation. The moment she appeared, she forced Alma to sit for a tarot reading. Alma had no choice but to comply. The cards were laid out. The final card turned over, and before anyone could intervene, the astrologer killed Alma with her own power. The old woman was gone. The three remaining friends ran in different directions through the mansion. Paige became separated from Haley and Grant. She heard a voice calling for help from somewhere below and followed it down to the basement. It was a trap. The magician was waiting for her in the darkness below with a horrifying performance. Ready? The magician was unlike any of the other creatures. It moved like a performer, theatrical and precise and completely merciless. It bound Paige and placed her inside a large box, like a classic magician's stage trick. Then it performed the saw illusion. Except this was no illusion. Paige was gone. Another card fulfilled. Now only Haley and Grant remained. Two friends, former lovers, standing alone in a cursed mansion surrounded by the evidence of everything they had lost that weekend. Grant had drawn the Devil card. Haley had drawn Death, both of the most feared cards in the entire tarot deck. Both still waiting to be fulfilled. Grant was seized by the Devil, the most powerful creature in the deck, and dragged away from Haley. She screamed his name. She reached for him, but the Devil was too strong. Haley was completely alone now. And the Death card, her card, still had not claimed anyone yet. In that moment of absolute terror and complete isolation, Haley had a sudden and brilliant realization. The astrologer had cursed this deck to kill everyone who received a reading, but the curse worked both ways. The cards could be read for anyone, including the astrologer herself, including the very woman who created the curse. Haley sat down on the floor of the mansion, with the ancient cursed deck in her trembling hands. She began laying out a tarot reading, not for herself, not for her friends, but for the astrologer. Card by card, she turned them over slowly. The mansion shook around her. The final card in the astrologer's reading was turned over by Haley's shaking hand. She looked at it. Then she looked up into the darkness and spoke directly to the spirit of the astrologer, with compassion rather than fear. She told it up and spoke the words that 200 years of cursed souls had never thought to say. She told the astrologer it was time to rest. Time to let go. Time to release the grief that had consumed her for centuries. Something shifted in the air. The supernatural presence that had filled the mansion for the entire night began to weaken. The astrologer's spirit, faced with her own death card, finally felt something it had not felt in 200 years. Peace. The rage began dissolving. The grief began releasing. The curse began breaking. The cards caught fire on their own, burning from the inside out, without any flame touching them. Every single hand-painted card in the ancient cursed deck was consumed by supernatural fire, one by one. The creatures of the major arcana dissolved into nothing. The darkness lifted. The mansion fell completely silent at last. Grant stumbled back into the room, alive. The Devil had released him the moment the curse broke. He found Haley sitting on the floor, surrounded by the ash of the burned cards. She looked up at him. He looked at her. Both of them breathing. Both of them real. Both of them still here. They walked out of the mansion together into the cold night air. Paxton pulled up in his car moments later, having survived his own encounter by the smallest possible margin. The three remaining friends stood together outside the mansion that had taken so much from them. Nobody spoke for a long time. There was nothing left to say. The cursed deck of tarot cards was destroyed. The astrologer's spirit had finally found peace after 2 centuries of rage and darkness. The creatures of the major arcana were gone forever. But for friends, were never coming home. For people who drew the wrong cards from the wrong deck on the wrong night, there is one golden rule about tarot cards that every reader knows. Never use someone else's deck, because you never know whose pain is trapped inside those cards. You never know whose grief has poisoned them. You never know what ancient darkness has been waiting patiently for the next person to pick them up.